Ethel Kennedy, the steadfast widow of Robert F. Kennedy and the guiding force behind one of America's most influential families, has passed away at the age of 96. Her life, marked by deep love, family devotion, and unimaginable tragedy, has come to an end, leaving behind a legacy woven into the very fabric of American history. Ethel died on Thursday, October 10, from complications related to a stroke she suffered just a week prior, as announced in a statement from her daughter Carrie, posted on X, formerly Twitter. The statement encapsulated the enduring faith and hope that Ethel held throughout her life. It read, "She was a devout Catholic and a daily communicant, and we are comforted in knowing she is reunited with the love of her life, our father Robert F. Kennedy, her children David and Michael, her daughter-in-law Mary, her grandchildren Maeve and Saoirse, and her great-grandchildren Gideon and Josie. Please keep our mother in your hearts and prayers." Ethel Kennedy was the mother of 11 children, 2 of whom tragically preceded her in death. Her son David died from a drug overdose in 1984 in Palm Beach, Florida, while another son, Michael, lost his life in 1997 during a skiing accident in Aspen, Colorado, when he hit a tree while playing touch football on the slopes. But the sorrow didn't end there. Over her 9 decades of life, Ethel endured the deaths of loved ones again and again, from the assassination of her husband in 1968 to the losses of her children and grandchildren in later years. Her life became an emblem of both the glory and the grief that often follow those whose names are etched into the national consciousness. Her personal tragedies began with a shared experience of loss that echoed through the Kennedy family. Just 5 years before her husband's assassination, his brother, President John F. Kennedy, was killed in Dallas, a national trauma that sent ripples of sorrow through the country. Ethel's own family also experienced unspeakable loss. In 1955, when she was still a young woman, her parents, George and Skakel, died in a plane crash. Yet, despite these tragic blows, she carried on, embodying a strength that would come to define her public image. Painful loss of her nephew, John F. Kennedy Jr., in a 1999 plane crash, alongside his wife, Carolyn Bessette, and her sister, Lauren, was another blow that reverberated across the globe. Ethel remained a symbol of resilience, even when the tragedies seemed endless. The death of her daughter-in-law, Mary Richardson Kennedy, the wife of her son Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who took her own life in 2012, was another heartache that Ethel had to endure. Her family was touched by loss repeatedly, as her granddaughter Saoirse Kennedy died of an accidental drug overdose in August 2019, followed by her great-grandson Gideon, who was lost in a canoeing accident with his mother Maeve Kennedy Townsend McKean in the spring of 2020. In many ways, Ethel's life embodied the American public's perception of the Kennedy curse, a series of tragic events that befell this family of public servants, politicians, and activists, despite their immense privilege and power. Yet, through it all, Ethel remained a figure of quiet grace. When asked how she coped with the seemingly unending loss, Ethel, who admitted that she was never one for introspection, once told People in a 2012 interview, "I pretty well lived in the moment. And I was blessed with faith." This simple yet profound statement captured the heart of her resilience. For Ethel, life was something to be endured, embraced, and believed in, despite the pain that often accompanied it. Born on April 11, 1928, Ethel Skakel was the 6th of 7 children to her parents, George and Skakel. The family grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, where Ethel's father made his fortune as the founder of Great Lakes Carbon Corporation, a prominent industrial firm of the time. The Skakels lived in splendor, a world of wealth and privilege that foreshadowed Ethel's later life with the Kennedys. Her introduction to the Kennedy family came in 1945, when she met Robert "Bobby" Kennedy, the brother of her Manhattanville college roommate Jean Kennedy, during a ski trip in Quebec. Ethel later said of that first meeting, "No maybe about it." She was instantly attracted to Bobby, although at the time he was dating her older sister Patricia. That romance lasted 2 years, but after their breakup, Bobby turned his attention to Ethel and a new chapter began. In 1950, Ethel and Bobby were married, marking the start of what would become an iconic American partnership. The young couple shared an immediate and strong desire for a large family. "We both wanted a lot of children, but there wasn't a huge discussion about it," she once remarked. "It wasn't a big deal. We were both from big families. Indeed, the Kennedys would go on to have 11 children together, raising them in their 13-bedroom home, Hickory Hill in McLean, Virginia. Bobby's legal career took off after law school, leading him to a position in the Department of Justice and later to the role of U.S. Attorney General under his brother, President John F. Kennedy. Through it all, Ethel was by Bobby's side, supporting his political career with an unfaltering belief in his commitment to the public good. After John F. Kennedy's assassination, Ethel threw her full support behind Bobby's presidential campaign, believing deeply in the change he could bring to the country. It was on the fateful night of June 5, 1968, after Bobby had won the California primary, that their shared dream was shattered. As Bobby spoke to a jubilant crowd at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, he was shot and killed by an assassin. Ethel, who was pregnant with their youngest child, Rory, at the time, was left to carry on alone, a widow with 11 children and the weight of a nation's grief on her shoulders. In the years that followed, Ethel's faith became her anchor. She often spoke of Bobby as being happy in heaven, reunited with his brother John, and this belief helped her cope with the unbearable loss. "I'd wake up in the morning and think he was happy in heaven and he had Jack, and they were together as they had been together on earth," she reflected. It was this kind of unwavering faith that enabled Ethel to keep going, despite the many hardships that followed. Her belief in the power of love, family, and justice manifested itself in her founding of the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights, an organization dedicated to continuing the work Bobby had started. Ethel spent the next 5 decades fiercely advocating for human rights and fighting for the causes her husband had championed. Her daughter Carrie eventually took over the leadership of the center, ensuring that the Kennedy legacy would continue to inspire future generations. While her public life was marked by her commitment to justice and human rights, Ethel's private life was often more complicated. Her relationships with her children were sometimes fraught, shaped by the intensity of her own experiences and her own expectations. As her son Bobby Kennedy Jr. wrote in his 2018 memoir, American Values, "Lessons I Learned from My Family, my mother divided the world into friend and foe. Generally, she judged the latter by harsher standards, and yet she sometimes discarded time-honored friendships for minor infractions." Bobby's words reflected a mother who could be both fiercely protective and deeply critical, a woman who demanded much of those she loved but who had also lived through more heartache than most could imagine. Bobby, who struggled with drug addiction as a teenager, found that his relationship with his mother evolved over time. After getting sober in the mid-80s, the two became closer, and Bobby came to understand that much of his mother's toughness stemmed from the tremendous losses she had suffered. "Everyone takes their licks," she told him once. "We feel like we ought to be able to write our own scripts to our lives, and sometimes we feel disappointed in God when life rewrites the plot. Key is acceptance and gratitude. We need to practice wanting what we've got, not what we wish we had." These words, like much of Ethel's philosophy, were simple yet deeply profound. Her ability to keep moving forward, to love fiercely even after enduring so much loss, made Ethel Kennedy a symbol of strength. Her life was marked by service, not only to her family but to her country, and her influence will continue to be felt for generations to come.